Hello and welcome to today's webinar, How to Automate Recovery from Ransomware and More with Rubrik. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got a great event lined up for you here today with a really cool demo as well. You're going to learn how you can use Rubrik to completely automate your disaster recovery and rapidly recover from ransomware should you be attacked. Before we get started, you should know my name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as the moderator. As always, we want these events to be educational, and we encourage your questions. So many companies out there are being hit with ransomware left and right. So if you're interested in this solution and how it can help you to rapidly recover, this is a great opportunity to ask your questions. You can ask those questions there in the questions pane, and we even have a best question prize to help encourage your questions. I'll talk about that here in just a moment. But first, I want to encourage you to check out the handouts tab as well for additional resources, and point out that we do have an Amazon $300 gift card door prize that we'll be announcing at the end of the live event. If you're watching this on demand, of course, the drawing has already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found there in the handouts tab. And then, as I mentioned, we also have a best question prize for an additional gift card, a $50 Amazon gift card. Of course, you have to ask a question to be entered into that drawing and also meet our Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. And with that, it's time to kick it off. It's time to get started and bring in now our expert presenter. Welcome, Mr. Carl Norwich, go-to-market lead for app flows at Rubrik. Carl, it's great to have you on. Take it away.
Yeah, sure, appreciate it, and thanks everyone for attending. Again, I'm Carl Norwich. I'm what we call here at Rubrik the go-to-market lead for app flows. It's a new orchestrated disaster recovery product we recently brought to market, and we're thrilled to talk to you about it today. Just a little background on myself. Been in tech for about 20 years in a variety of roles. For the last 12, I've been really focusing on go-to-market startup technologies, and been with Rubrik really since the beginning as employee 47. So it's a real pleasure to talk to everybody here and give you a little background on Rubrik and more specifically around the DR product we're bringing to market. So just as we get started here, what we've done is essentially at our heart as a company, we're an orchestrated we're a backup company, I should say. And we've reached unicorn status by Silicon Valley standards by radically changing and simplifying the way you manage and back up your data. And the DR part of it is layered right on top of that. So I think it's really important first to kind of understand our roots and understand the core value propositions that we could bring to your data center, to your operations team. So really our key tenets are we want to automate data protection as much as we can, and we'll talk a bit more about that. But I want you to imagine a world where you're not managing jobs, you're not having to manage failures of jobs. You simply tell a platform what you want it to do, and it'll take care of it. Secondly, I think we can all agree that we have to worry about tornadoes, hurricanes, act of God type of events in terms of disaster. But unfortunately for all of us, ransomware is really a much more likely scenario, and you need to figure out a way to have a last line of defense to recover your data and make sure it's secured. And on top of that, or to that point, the way that we built the system is that we have an immutable append-only file system, meaning when I write data into this system, it can't be changed by Rubrik or anybody else. So really what we've done now is created a logical air gap with your data being locked in time in a secure manner so that you do have the ability to recover. So when we look at this from an operations perspective, if you look at how backup has been done traditionally, you have a lot of decisions to make. First of all, you have to select which backup software you're going to pick. And then from that point, that vendor will typically say, I need this many backup servers, this many proxies so that I can ingest and thread the data. Then at that point, I need to figure out where am I going to store that data, a data domain, a disk drive, or something like that. Where can I store the data so I can have it at my fingertips in the event that I need it? And then even longer term, if you're beholden to any kind of compliance, then you would typically put it to tape and send it off to a salt mine somewhere. And what we've done essentially at our core is that we've taken everything that you see here on the screen, the backup software, the backup servers, the proxies, media servers, replication, CDP, and the like, and we've consolidated it into one elastic piece of software where what we have the capability to do with our software is consolidate everything where you have a singular management point for all of your backup operations, which radically simplifies the way in which you manage your business. Secondarily, as I mentioned, it's not really described here, is that really at the core of all that changes the way you operationally manage is this concept of an SLA. Now, this system is self-managing all the jobs that you ask us to do. But more importantly, if you think about the process that you may be dealing with today, is that your business owners will come to you and say, here's my RPO and here's my RTO. You take those business requirements and you have to translate them into a backup job. Imagine a platform where you could simply type those requirements into the system, and then we maintain that compliance on your behalf. So again, it's meant to be a low touch, set it once and forget type of solution. Next, on the RTO. Now, a lot of times this has really been cumbersome, and we've all been there, right? You get a ticket, user says, I deleted a file and I need it back. Unfortunately for us, a lot of times it's somebody important, so you have to go as quick as you can. And finding that information and recovering it can be extremely challenging. And sometimes just finding the file in the first place can be a challenge. So what we've done in this regard is that we've radically accelerated your capabilities of doing recovery from a recovery from backup perspective. What we're able to do is instantly turn your data on, whether you be Nutanix, whether you be VMware, whether you be Hyper-V. We can even live mount SQL and Oracle databases so your DBAs can go in and pull tables out specifically if they need and get back out again in an extremely short amount of time. But the other thing that's really important here is the way that, because we can archive to cloud, the way that we can simplify finding these files and these data sets that you need. Now, when you go through and you search for these files, we not only search what's locally available on our system, but we're also searching any of your archive targets that may be in the cloud in a single workflow. So you don't have to worry about jumping from one interface to the next in order to find your data. And lastly, from a standpoint of saving, right? I mean, I think that we can all agree that we're trying to go to an OpEx mode type of approach. You want to do just-in-time consumption. You don't want to have to do this idea of what am I going to need 3 years from now and then buy it all up front. You don't want to do forklift upgrades and all these types of things. So with our system, what you do is we have a subscription model. We do have hardware that is inclusive with that. And essentially what you do is just buy the front-end terabytes that you need, get the entitlements that you need, and then you can continue to grow that over time. So you now have a just-in-time consumption model as opposed to having to pay to everything at the front. Additionally, because of the way we've designed the system, there are no forklift upgrades. You're able to readily expand our cluster, retire, and add nodes ad hoc whenever you need to. So imagine the value of having persistence in that, where you're not having to transfer data to another cluster as you buy stuff every 3 to 5 years. And as a consequence of that, our customers are gaining 30 to 50% cost savings over time. All right, so that's a little bit about the foundation of Rubrik. Well, let's talk about my baby, if you will, our orchestrated disaster recovery product that we call App Flows. So the best way to compartmentalize this is that we've layered in a service that could be analogous to, say, an SRM, for an example, Site Recovery Manager from VMware, where what we're going to do is be able to give you the ability to have application availability across sites. So first, I think it's important to understand our approach here, and this will give you a little bit of insight into the company as well. Is that, as I mentioned a moment ago, our roots are in backup and recovery on-premise and in the cloud, including AWS, Azure, and Office 365. So what we've understood as a company is the fact that I've captured all of that data has a lot of potential value. Because having all the data consolidated in one place, why can't I derive more business value out of it? But the key here is that at the end of the day, we're a SaaS software company. We're not a hardware company. So how can we derive more value out of your backups without having to sell you more hardware? And the first step to that for us was creating a SaaS platform, a delivery model that we call Polaris. The idea behind this is twofold. One, it's an aggregation point of all the particular workloads that you may be backing up, whether it be Office 365, whether it be EC2 instances, whether it be VHDs in Azure, whether it be on-premise VMware, and et cetera. And this gives you an aggregate point to look at your entire business from a single point. But additionally, what it allows us to do is defer all the overhead of additional services onto the SaaS platform and not have to sell you more hardware. One example of this is for ransomware recovery. It's a product that we call Radar. Now, what we do is we watch your data, watch the backups over time, learn your data sets, and if we see something out of the ordinary, we can alert you and let you know that something is suspicious and you should investigate it. So it's an alerting mechanism, if you will. But more importantly, if you think about operationally, if anybody here has had to recover from ransomware, is the next thing, your next biggest question is, what the heck got hit, right? What is the blast radius? And that's where this tool comes in extremely handy. It'll quickly be able to tell you which workloads and which business services have been impacted. Secondly, we have data governance. We're able to look at your data, use analyzers to look at your PII information, your HIPAA compliance, your customer social security numbers, credit cards, or where you think they should be, if the right users have access to those folders, so that you can quickly run reports and take remediation action. Now, the key thing about both of these products that I just mentioned is that they require no additional hardware beyond what you're already using for backup. So as I mentioned, these are ways for us to derive more business value for you out of your backups. And that's how we're delivering app flows. The disaster recovery solution we're talking about today is that from our perspective, if Rubrik's already backing up your workloads and it's already replicating them, the data movement's done. So now it's a matter of adding in the logic and the orchestration to bring your applications back online gracefully at a tertiary site. And that's exactly what we've done here. Essentially, thinking about it is that we've decoupled the data plane from the logic plane in a SaaS delivery. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention as well, the best thing about SaaS for everybody on the phone who's an operator is that because it's SaaS delivered, you don't have to worry about code updates. You don't have to worry about hot fixes. You don't have to worry about those emergency emails from vendors saying, please update this as quickly as you can. We found a problem. We handle all of that for you. So you get to simply log into this platform and be a true consumer of a service. So when you look at the DR market as it stands now, it's certainly an incumbent market, meaning it existed before our product was brought to market. It was really important for us to understand from customer feedback what you don't like about what's out there today. And consistently, these are three areas that we heard a lot of pain. First of all, the operational complexity of managing traditional DR solutions. They're challenging to set up, they're challenging to learn, and they're very cumbersome to manage during runtime. So we'll talk a bit about how we want to address that. Secondly, the expense. From my perspective, again, having done this 20 years, as I dove deeper into some of the incumbent products that are in this space, I've never seen a more vendor-centric licensing model. You pay per VM or per set of VMs. You have pay gates for all these different features. You even have pay ceilings with some products. If you use too much of it, you have to pay more money, which seems kind of backwards. So we've simplified this, and I'll skip to the end on this one, where it's subscription licensing and it's per appliance. And you simply pay for the year, and there will be no pay gates ever with our product. So you get entitlements to anything that we innovate and add onto the product without additional incurred cost. And lastly, I think we can all agree, free rounds of golf and free lunches are nice from vendors, but at the end of the day, less vendors you have in your data center, the more operationally efficient you are. So not only are we bringing DR into our portfolio, but also we made a real effort to make the product integral to the way you manage Rubrik today, so you don't have to learn a whole new tool. Net, if you can use Rubrik, you're going to be able to use AppFlows. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how it works. So first of all, let's talk about the vernacular. So in this market, you hear things such as runbook, virtual protection group, or something to that effect. Our equivalent is going to be what we call an application blueprint, or blueprint for short. So think of this as a logical container where you're going to tell us this set of VMs is representative of a particular application. It's also where you're going to tell us things such as what boot order do you want us to bring the VMs online at the DR site? What compute and storage do you want us to leverage? What networking do you want us to apply to those VMs? And most importantly, at the end of the day, we are a backup company. What backup policy do you want us to apply to these workloads once the failover is complete so backups continue? Unfortunately for all of us, just because you had a failover event doesn't mean you get to stop backing up your data. So in terms of RTO, we actually have two different options, which is unique to the marketplace. We have something that we call incremental export, which is a standby model, if you will, and then we have on-demand export. So let me walk you through this real quickly. If you imagine that on the left-hand side, that's your production data center over your production Rubrik, and we're backing up your data. And I should mention that we're an incremental forever backup system, meaning we take one full, and after that it's incrementals forever. And then we're replicating that data over to a DR Rubrik in your DR site. What incremental export is going to give you is the ability, what we're doing essentially is adding a third leg to that replication, where that DR brick is going to push that data into the data store proactively. Now, we're not going to power those VMs on. We're not even going to give them networking. But what we're essentially doing is staging the data. And as additional backups are taken on the primary side and then replicated to the DR side, we're going to incrementally update those images. So the latest RPO is always sitting in the waiting, ready to rock. And what this does is it gives you a ton of consistency around RTO, because we're not having to move any data in order to bring your application back online. Now, you can select from any RPO available on that DR brick, which is tunable to your liking, and we'll simply just rewind those images to the point in time, which means we only have to transfer that delta in order to bring them back. So we're still, even if you're picking a previous point, we're minimizing the amount of data that needs to be transferred. So that's something that's more of a traditional model. The great part about incremental export is I get a very fast RTO. Downside is I'm using primary storage during runtime, even if I'm not really using it. And that's where on-demand comes in. On-demand is a similar concept. I'm backing up in production. I'm replicating to DR. However, we're not going to push that data into that data store until you break glass and hit the big red button or run a DR test. And we think this is really unique because think about how you buy DR today. You don't buy it for all your apps typically. You just buy it for your tier zeros and your tier ones because of the cost associated. I mentioned earlier we license by appliance by year, which is very straightforward. But more importantly is we don't even have to consume primary storage until you absolutely have to. So this allows for your operators to get the benefit of the automation without the overhead of having primary storage on those tier 2, tier 3 apps. For RPO, our RPO available for Apple's use is really driven by how often you do your backup cadence. But we can go essentially anywhere from a daily all the way down to CDP with a 60-second RPO available on the DR side. Now, what's unique here also is that within this blueprint, the VMs can have varying SLAs. So imagine you have a 3-tier app with a web server, an app server, and a database server. You don't want to run CDP against your web server. It's a waste of resources. Why would you bother? So let's back it up daily. And on the app server, most applications, now those are largely stateless, but you still want to capture configuration changes. So let's back it up every, say, 4 or 8 hours. But on the database layer, let's run CDP against that so I can minimize transaction loss. And all 3 of those can live in the same blueprint. And when you go to do a recovery, the system will call out that variance in RPOs so you can make a decision, am I comfortable with that? Or do I want to dial it in a little bit closer to something that's healthier for the app if needed? So it's all about flexibility here. Fail over and fail back is 2 clicks and a confirmation phrase. It's very straightforward. Now, failing back is just an inverse of the fail over. And what we've done here is that, if you remember, I mentioned that in this blueprint, we also assign an SLA to your workloads. It serves 2 purposes. First of all, of course, it's the purpose of backing up your data. But secondly, what it's going to do is start trying to replicate back to production as quickly as that site can come online if that's not a smoking hole type of an event. That means that we're automatically synchronizing your data back to production as quickly as that site can come back online, automatically with no operator intervention. So that means that truly your fail back is just an inverse of your failover, 2 clicks and a confirmation phrase. And then lastly, the product can, of course, do DR testing, but we also have canned compliance reporting so that you can give that to your operational leadership or to anybody within your or to any auditors that you may be beholden to prove that you're DR ready. All right, so lastly, I have a couple more slides and then we'll field some questions. As I mentioned at the onset, is that the reality we have to all face is that ransomware is really the modern disaster. It's something that we have to deal with daily, and everyone goes through as many preventative steps to stop it proactively as they can. But what if they get through? We really need to focus on a way of how can we get your business back online if the worst were to happen. And really, Sean said it best here by saying he's 10 times more worried about ransomware than he is about a hurricane or a tornado, for example. So let's talk through that a little bit. So what if the inevitable happens? So first of all, we need to kind of think about all the things that Rubrik has in its portfolio. First of all, we have an immutable append-only file system, which means your data is in a vault. Secondly, I mentioned earlier that we have that product Radar, which watches your data sets and looks for anomalies so that it can detect a ransomware attack and give you that insight. Now, what we've changed here is that we've integrated Radar and AppFlows together. And why that's unique is remember that you created these blueprints. You've defined the applications within the Rubrik ecosystem by way of AppFlows. So now when you're in Radar, instead of seeing a list of VMs, you're going to see a list of business services that are now impacted. So that's the first step here is what has been impacted, and figure that out as quickly as we can. The second part of it is to which point in time do I recover? How quickly, where do I want to recover to? Now, Radar is going to recommend a point in time for you to recover to that was previous to the malicious behavior. And what we've done is that we're going to pre-populate those times into AppFlows for you as you go through and do your recovery wizard. So you don't have to worry about taking information from one tool and placing it in another. And then lastly is how do I recover? Now, no matter how easy I or any of my competitors make DR, operationally DR is a painful thing, failing to do a DR site. And it's already going to be chaotic if you've been hit by ransomware. So when you go through and say, yes, I want to recover these applications, we're going to go to your production VMs and rewind them to the point in time that you selected, and then reboot them in the order that it was prescribed per the blueprint, and bring your application back online gracefully at the RPO you selected. So you don't have to fail over to DR in order to recover from a ransomware attack. Again, easing the burden on the operations team as they figure out how this happened and how to prevent it for the next time.
All right. Excellent presentation, Carl. Thank you so much. We do have now a demo from Rubrik of the new Rubrik AppFlows orchestrated ransomware recovery solution. So with that, let's move now over to the demo. Here we go.
An IT organization faces a critical set of challenges when ransomware strikes. It's an all-hands effort to identify compromised accounts, systems, and data. Here, the administrators have been made aware that they have been compromised, likely by ransomware. Luckily, they use Rubrik Polaris's radar and can identify the impacted systems and data. They combine that knowledge with Rubrik Polaris's app flows to recover entire applications with ease. From the radar dashboard, they navigate to the anomalies page to identify which objects have suspicious activity. At the top of the list, they see File01 and App01 are highly suspicious. These are both blueprint objects, which are collections of virtual machines and resource mappings that define the application. This allows Rubrik to recover it as a single unit. As they dig deeper into the blueprints, they see that not all VMs seem to be compromised. But they decide to recover all resources in both blueprints by selecting each at the top level. Better safe than sorry. They start the recovery wizard by clicking the Recover button. From here, they drill in to see what resources will be recovered from which points in time. Radar has flagged which most recent snapshot does not contain the suspicious activity and marks it with a green shield. They could select a different point in time to recover to, but they stick with Radar's recommendations. They save their selection and tell Rubrik to pause the recovery in case of errors. At the confirmation page, they type the confirmation phrase and click Recover to begin the recovery. As with all tasks in Rubrik, it can be monitored in the event section. With Rubrik Polaris's radar and app flows, you gain the integration of suspicious activity insights with prescriptive and orchestrated recovery, so you can quickly assess an attack and efficiently recover from it.
So with that was about the end of my presentation. So I will stop there, and I'm happy to field any questions that you all may have, and thank you for your time again.
Absolutely. Yeah, great presentation. So first question that came in here, Carl, I wanted to ask you is they want to know what impact is there on production when doing DR testing with Rubrik?
There's no impact. So when you set up these blueprints, you actually set up two different networking configurations, one for production use in the case of an actual DR event, and then one that would be used for testing, which is going to be typically isolated from the production network. And that way we can spin your workloads on, they are live. So you can pass transactions or verify, but it's in an isolated network group, so there's going to be no impact to production whatsoever.
Very nice. That's cool. And then another question here, if VMs are part of the orchestration workflow, they're asking if you can identify if they were corrupted with ransomware.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we went over a moment ago with that radar integration. So again, I like to think of this as tools in a tool shed and what can I build. Because we have radar, that ransomware remediation software, is an available tool for us to leverage, and by integrating it with app flows, not only can we again detect everything and do it at an application level, but we can also integrate the recovery as a fast track.
Nice, I like that. The tools in the tool shed are the like Batman with the tool belt there. You've got all different tools you can pull out anytime you need them.
There you go.
Next question, they're wanting to know, can you use Rubrik for some assets and other DR software for others?
You certainly could. I mean, they can coexist. I mean, we're only going to protect and interact with what you direct us at. I would say that we feel like we have a very strong story across the board. But certainly, if there's some particular workloads that we don't support or that you just don't feel comfortable with using Rubrik for, we can certainly coexist. We're very deterministic in terms of what we're interacting with based on your input to us.
And then there's another question here. Does Rubrik support multi-cloud or hybrid cloud data protection?
100%. So again, it's back to that analogy of tools in the tool shed. So, excuse me. So we can, of course, protect on-prem workloads, and we do have the capability to protect cloud-native workloads that may be running in Amazon or Azure, for an example, and Office 365. And I think the nicest thing about how we've approached this is that Polaris SaaS platform. Now, what that allows for you to do is orchestrate all of your backup and recovery operations, whether that be cloud-native or on-premise, from that one focal point. So it really gives you a one-stop shop from an operator perspective of how you're managing your business and how you're taking care of all your recovery and backup operations.
Very nice. And then let's see, there's another question they want to know, are you able to schedule DR testing at regular intervals to satisfy the auditors?
So we don't have the scheduling tool in AppFlows yet, but we're planning on it. But what's nice about Rubrik as an approach is that we're an API-first company. And with AppFlows, we do have SDKs, so we can actually go and we can do it programmatically. But again, we do intend to add it to the platform. The other thing I'd mention there is that this is my technical counterpart's favorite part of the system is the automated cleanup. So when you go through and do a DR test, you can set the error handler to either pause or to abort and clean up, which means we'll clean up the mess behind ourselves. So there's absolutely no reason you can't programmatically schedule DR testing. And if something fails, we'll go in and clean up behind ourselves and not leave a mess in any of the vCenters or ESX hosts.
Next question, they want to know, what about fail back? You can fail over, but Sean's asking, how do I fail back?
I love it. Yeah, no, we're not Hotel California, so don't worry. So as I mentioned, so fail back is just the same process as failing over. So remember when you define this blueprint, you're telling us what backup policy to assign to it so we can continue protection. But part of that is also the replication target is going to be your production site, your original production site. So if you had a power outage or some sort of a transient event or insert here, but that data center came back online, those bricks are going to reconnect, and then we're going to start synchronizing the data back over to production, or the original production, I should say. And then again, it's the same process as you went on a failover. You tell us where to land, which data store to use, which you do have to declare on the failback, and then you just say failback. And what we do is we actually go to the production workloads, take an on-demand backup so that we can catch any deltas. We power the VMs off, and then we fail everything over and then bring them back online, of course, over on the primary side. So it's a zero data loss failover and failback, assuming the site wasn't lost, if it was more scheduled or planned.
Awesome. Next question, what about AppFlows? How does that fit in with Rubrik? Is this a separate product you add on if you already have Rubrik, or what's the model there?
Yeah, absolutely. It is an add-on to Rubrik. So it does require, of course, like the Rubrik backup, because really the theme here is we're making your backups more valuable to you, if that makes sense. But the foundation there is, of course, us capturing that data and backing it up. So this is something that you can, if you're a Rubrik customer today, you can certainly add into your portfolio. But it is a requirement, of course, that Rubrik is backing up your workloads in order to leverage AppFlows. So it's not a standalone product, if you will.
Got it. Okay. And so what's the easiest way to get started with Rubrik? What do you recommend?
So a couple of things. So first of all, I would reach out to any of your partners that you work with. We're a channel first company. Or of course you can reach out to Rubrik directly. And what we've done, and this is actually my old job as I was a senior director for this, is we actually have cloud labs that are available. So if you want to go and hear a more thorough story of our capabilities, our approach, and our value add, and you're intrigued, we actually can give you an ability to go play with the product live online in the cloud, so that you don't have to go through all the overhead of bringing gear on site and doing a proper POC while you're in your investigation phase, if you will. So I would highly recommend reaching out, again, directly to Rubrik or to your channel partner. We have a huge channel partner network. Again, we're channel first. But as you're going through and doing your due diligence, we do have the ability for you to interact with any of these products on a cloud lab with live VMware, live Rubrik, and everything else, so that you can get your hands dirty, if you will, without, again, having all the overhead of bringing in hardware.
Sounds like a great opportunity, easy way to get started. Do it in a cloud lab. Really great presentation, Carl. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.